Rashad, you are live.
We are live. We're becoming live. Looks like we are live right now. And it looks like, looks like we are good to go. Got it. Hey, Mr. Hallam, how are you today?
Rashad, you are live. Really well, thanks, Rashad.
We are live. Let me see. All right. So here is the deal. I have Mr. Andrew Hallam. He is visiting with me again today, and I'm super excited about this interview. He actually visited with me back in May, and we discussed how he became the millionaire teacher. And this is just a follow-up interview. And, earlier when we did discuss how he became a millionaire teacher, we had really good dialogue. We talked about some of the steps that he took and his family took to get to that point. Today, we're going to actually discuss his new book, which is titled Balance: How to Invest and Spend for Happiness, Health, and Wealth, which is set to be released January 18th. And I'm super excited because I've been on pre-order for quite a few months now. So I'm looking forward to actually receiving the book. This book actually seeks to take you on a holistic journey of success by answering the following questions. How can we boost longevity, wealth, and happiness? When it comes to spending, what sorts of purchases really enhance happiness? And also, how should we define success? And based on that definition, how can your children also be successful? So today, I actually want to introduce Mr. Andrew Hallam. Mr. Hallam, how are you doing today?
Really well, thanks, Rashad. Thanks for the opportunity.
Hey, man, I'm excited about the opportunity. So why don't you go ahead and tell me about what's been going on in your personal and professional life since we last sat down and had a conversation?
Yeah, I guess we last spoke in May. So I was in Canada, sort of not typically my home. I'm a global nomad, as you know, but I was there for initially a 12-day visit in 2020, which then COVID hit, and so it went the whole year. But after we were chatting, I was actually able to get out to visit my mother-in-law. My wife and I went to see my mother-in-law in Pennsylvania. And then I took a trip to Italy, which was pretty cool. I invited a bunch of guys that didn't initially know each other, and people that I had met in my sort of travels that I thought would get along really, really well and connect well as people. And so I invited all of them to meet me at this hotel in Italy. And we basically had this active cycling vacation together. And it was actually really cool just to watch the interactions, because they were all from different countries, different cultures. So it was a lot of fun for me to just watch that. So if I'm a student of anything, I think, Rashad, it's just, I guess, a student of human nature, a student of someone who wants to enhance life satisfaction as much as I can. And like most people, be mildly entertained in that process. We ended up going back to Pennsylvania, and then shortly thereafter, we've come to Panama. So that's where I am right now. So okay. I'm in warm, hot Panama City, in the country of Panama, not too far from the Panama Canal.
That's pretty awesome. That's awesome. I actually have a fraternity brother who reached out to me. He saw one of my videos, and he lives in Panama, and they want to start like some kind of like an investment club or whatever, just getting out information in Panama. So it's pretty interesting that you said that's where you are.
Yeah, that's ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very ironic, very ironic. So how long did you have your trip as far as in Italy?
Yeah, that was about 10 days.
Did you hear me?
Yeah, that was about a 10-day trip.
Oh, sorry. So I'm having a little bit of internet issues on my end, but I think I'm good to go. So it was a 10-day trip, and it's one of those things that when I look at balance and we look at experiences. So I've always told my kids, hey, I value experiences more than I value things, and I will pay for any experience. I won't pay for anything. So why don't you tell me a little bit about, when you talk about your book Balance, how do you incorporate experiences and, being able to splurge on those things in your life?
Yeah, I mean, just backing up a little bit, when people talk about, or whenever we have goals, any kind of goal at all, we ask someone why they want to do something. Invariably, if we keep digging with why, it comes down to them wanting like safety, security, or happiness. So essentially just elements of life satisfaction. So, when I wrote the book Balance, I tried to use that as a basis and to look at what does the science say about life satisfaction.
Mhm.
So now, back to your point, what the research suggests is that material acquisitions, for example, do not boost our life satisfaction,
Mm.
but relationships do. And if we're going to spend money on anything at all, spending money on experiences, especially when they can include people we love and respect,
Yes.
this is golden, because through that we build memories. And so, like, years from now, and you're thinking back at your life, it's the memories of the experiences with the people that you love, doing the unique things, or even the simple things, but it's just time with other people are those things that we're going to remember. So there's one element, when we talked about this last time too, in terms of what the happiness research suggests with respect to, like, buying a new car or upgrading our homes. And Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner in behavioral economics, has been researching life satisfaction for years. And he has said that we don't actually know what will make us happy. So the interesting thing is that we think that, if I buy a new phone, it's going to make me happy, or if I buy a new car or buy a new house or bigger house, this is actually going to augment my level of life satisfaction. And, and in my book, I talk about happiness and life satisfaction interchangeably a little bit, and most of us do. But
Mhm.
happiness is kind of fleeting. It's that quick sugar fix. It's that moment. Whereas in the book itself, when we look at the research is really based on not so much happiness blips, but overall life satisfaction, like
Yes.
overall contentment. How happy are you with your life? And so, back to your question on experiences, it's a spending. If we're spending money on experiences are truly what augments our life satisfaction, and not spending money on stuff.
Absolutely. So why don't you back up just a little bit and tell me how you came about actually writing the book? Because something had to have gone on. Maybe as you went on tours or you did speaking engagement, someone must have asked you about this, and your thought popped up in your head, I need to write a book about this. So what made you write the book?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. So our lives, my wife and I, we were working in Singapore in 2014, and we thought we would take a year off to travel. And like I said to you last time, I was loving my job. So I was a high school teacher, loved it. My wife said, let's take a year off to travel. And one year just led to two, which led to three, which led to seven. And in that time, I ended up giving more and more financial talks. So flying all over the world giving these talks, and that wasn't really by design. It was just people were asking me to do it, and then the more people that asked me, and the more talks I gave, the more demand for those talks ended up growing. So for us, we wanted this, some cool experiences together, to have some really amazing adventures. And so we ended up buying like a Winnebago Travato. It's a 21-foot long camper van.
Hmm.
And we decided we would drive it from Canada to Argentina.
Wow.
And so we spent 17 months in this thing, and it was an amazing experience. We didn't have a time frame, because we're financially independent. Plus, I can work online,
Yes.
so it didn't really matter when we got to Argentina. So we really took our time. And after about 17 months, we got to the border of El Salvador and Nicaragua. And Nicaragua was having some civil skirmishes, so we couldn't actually end up getting through there. And you need to get through Nicaragua to come further south. So
Yes.
it was more of a 17-month trip where we were Western US, but mostly Mexico and Central America. And so as the speaking requests were coming in, my wife was organizing everything, because I'm horrible with organizing. She would say to people, okay, we'll speak we'll be in Europe, 3 weeks in April. And so she started accepting speaking requests that were coming from Europe, and saying to people, look, we can do 3 weeks here in April, so we'll be here. So what we would do is we would store the van, and then we'd fly off to these different locations. And so coming back to the book, like, why did I write this book? We would end up speaking at banks, major investment firms, technology corporations, And we would end up hanging out with some people who earned really, really high incomes, who were conventionally extraordinarily successful.
Mhm.
We even ended up hanging out with some aristocrats from the UK, which was
Uh-huh.
interesting. They were very, very generous, and we had a wonderful time with them. So we made friends with these people, which is something I love to do. You know,
Yes.
like asking them questions and then not just going and speaking, but starting to socialize with them, and sometimes exploring pieces. They would be showing us, you know, their city and parts of their country. And then Pelly and I would fly back to, say, Guatemala or Belize or wherever we happened to be, and we would, you know, pray that our van was still there, and knock on wood, it was every time. And then um, we would hang out with the people we were hanging out with there, which were often these really bohemian types. You know, like they'd be raising their kids in an RV as they travel through Central America playing music.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, if I had to put a measurement on life satisfaction, I think I feel like I could actually see it in people's eyes. I could hear it in their voice and in their laughter. You know, how free is their laughter? You know, how stress-free they look, how content they look. And I realized that, wow, some of these people that were living really simply and traveling appeared to me to be far more satisfied with their lives than a lot of these other corporate CEOs. And so I started to wonder, well, what is it that defines success? And maybe we don't define success the right way. So for me, I came up with this idea that life satisfaction equals success. That's what success is. It's
Yes.
life satisfaction. So how do we get it? So I identified four major pillars. So one is, yeah, we need enough money, no doubt. I mean, studies suggest that happiness increases with income up to a certain point, not beyond that point. And that point's not as high as many people think, but it does increase with, if you're having troubles putting food on your table, you know, you're not able to live in a place where your family is safe. This drastically affects your life satisfaction. If you have a bit more money, to the point where you can eat well, you can have healthcare, you can educate your kids, even just a general, like a public school type of education. These are things that can just lift a lot of weight off people's shoulders. And so the thing that I looked at was money, and enough money was important, right? You don't have to have a gazillion dollars, but enough money to keep safe, food in the belly, maybe a little bit of money to spend on experiences, and a bit of money that you could say save for retirement. Two was relationships, and not in any particular order. Relationships are huge. So, you know, there's an 8-decade-long Harvard study on adult development, which shows that the single greatest variable for life satisfaction, and they've been studying these people for 8 decades and their children, they found that it's solid relationships. So based on my sort of interpretation of what it means to be successful, you could have all the money in the world, you could own a whole bunch of companies, but if your relationships are a train wreck, how can you be successful? Because success equals life satisfaction.
Yes.
So the third one was health, and it doesn't mean you have to be like an Olympian, but it means that you do what you can to at least facilitate that the vessel that you have is as healthy as it can be within reasons. And then the fourth is a sense of purpose. So you've got to have a reason to get up in the morning. I mean, one of the things that you can do to make someone entirely miserable is give them everything. So, you know, a trust fund child, for example, never, ever has to work, will never feel pride. Like, I've met people like this, and I've met their children who are given everything. And I know this is very anecdotal, but those kids tend to be miserable kids.
Yes.
This doesn't mean that all wealthy people do this, because a lot of wealthy people recognize that their children actually have to feel pride and have to feel accomplishment. They make them work for stuff, which is, you know, really, really smart. So yeah, that was one of the reasons I wanted to put together this book, Balance, because I thought it would be helpful. I thought a lot of people chase certain things, like they might chase more money. That's a big pursuit. Or they might chase the acquisition of things. And yet the things they chase don't actually add to their levels of contentment. So I wanted to write about the things that do add to levels of contentment, and write about effective investing through that process as well. because we can earn a middle-class income. And yet, if we're smart with our spending and we're smart with our investing, we can actually become financially independent at a younger age than most people if we just learn to think a little bit differently. And when I say a little bit differently, it's not necessarily denying yourself of anything, because these things that we often think we're, I'm not going to buy a brand new car, that's actually not denying you life satisfaction. The research suggests it isn't. So it is kind of cool for me to bust all of this open and then put this book together balanced, which I thought helpful for hopefully multiple generations.
And I can't wait for this book. I'm a huge fan of the minimalists, and one thing they talk about when you look at minimalism, it's really cutting out the things that keep you from being happy, cutting out the things that keep you from the things that make you happy, right? So that's all it is. And if you can speak on maybe 3 or 4 things that actually do make people happy, and then also let people know about the things that they think make them happy, but ultimately do not make them happy. So if somebody's tuning in for the first time and they don't even know who you are, what would you say these things are?
I'd say a simple thing, like if you've got a car and it's fine, it's not giving you any grief, you don't need to upgrade your vehicle because it won't make you any happier. It'll just be a sugar fix and it'll be expensive, and that new vehicle will depreciate, and in all likelihood, you borrowed money to buy it. So I would say this isn't something you want to be doing. But I'm not saying never to buy a thing, because in my book, one of the things I wanted to look at was where can an actual material purchase, like the world is really gray, right? It's not entirely black and white. So there are all kinds of different shades. So what are we looking at here? One of the things that was really sort of jumped out at me is that if you could buy something that actually allows you to have an experience that you wouldn't ordinarily have, and I'm not talking about something that you'd only use for a couple of weeks a year. So if it's a boat and you're only going to use it for a couple of weeks a year, that's a waste of money. It's like a hole in the water that you're pouring money into. However, if you're really into boating and you're going to use that thing like every single week of the year, then that boat can bring your family together with the water skiing or whatever it is that you want to be doing. In the book, I brought up an example of a friend of mine who bought a e-bike. Mm-hmm. And e-bikes are expensive, like, $4,000, $5,000 e-bike. And for him, Rashad, he and I used to cycle together when we were younger, and he's 10, 12 years older than me. And he ended up putting on a lot of weight and then having issues with his back and with his knees. And so he wouldn't ride with me or any of his friends anymore because he was self-conscious. And as a result of that, he didn't ride. So he just put on more and more weight. Then he gets an e-bike. Total game changer. Uh-huh. It's a material acquisition, but he loves to ride. Like, he's the kind of guy who, like, right now, he's riding that thing 5 days a week, all year long. Like, loves it. And what's cool about this is now he can do it with his friends. He can rejoin them in an activity that he really loved to do. And so I think to identify the why and the science behind some of the things that we're purchasing and recognize what material acquisitions can give you happiness and which material acquisitions, and most of them honestly don't augment your levels of happiness, but some do if they can bring people together and not just on one occasion. Like, it's something that otherwise it's a waste of money. You might as well rent it, right? So it was kind of cool for me to write about this.
That's pretty cool. And it's funny you talk about an e-bike. I actually have a friend. He was a client of mine. He's become a friend. And about a year and a half ago, he bought one of those, I don't know what they call it. It's like a tricycle, but it's electronic. It's like a motorcycle with the 2 wheels in the back. And, you see him riding on it all the time in the neighborhood. He picks his kids up from school on it, and his wife just got one as well. And, a lot of time when you see these kind of things, they're like toys, and people might ride it for a little bit and they'll be done with it, but he rides it all the time. So it's clear that it's bringing happiness to his wife and his wife's life, so if they never ride again, they've gotten their money worth. So that's definitely something that a material possession that brings happiness. So I definitely understand what you're saying there.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. There's some other research on like generosity.
Yes.
And if you're using your money in a way that will help and empower other people, and you can actually see the benefit. So, research suggests when we donate money to charity, generally that increases our levels of life satisfaction. People who give to charities end up reporting higher life satisfaction than people that don't. But there's another level here called pro-social giving, which is far more powerful than just donating to the United Way. Because when you donate to the United Way or most organizations, you don't see the results of what you've done. You can't see it. But when you can actually see where your money is gone, it's hugely impactful. So, for people who are listening here, it doesn't actually have to take a lot of money either. It can be something that's really, really small. But I will give you an example of something that my wife and I did when we were living in Singapore. Cambodia is not that far from Singapore. And we joined this group of people that went to Cambodia and helped these people build houses. And it was a really, really poor part of Cambodia where there isn't fresh running water. The people's homes are made of kind of mud and straw. And at the end of every monsoon season, they have to rebuild them.
Yeah.
And this organization goes in and actually talks to the people in villages and asks who's super poor, who needs some help. And like, they're all poor, like in this area, but who needs help? And so each person was kind of cool because they each point to somebody, not that nobody's going, oh, me, I thought that was neat. They point to somebody, and there were some common denominators there, like who needs some help, who's hardworking. And what the organization would do is they would go in then and say, okay, so, let's say the person's name is Joe. They're like, okay, Joe, we're going to set some goals for you to achieve. You work in the rice paddies and you earn a little bit of money. We're going to set some goals for you. So one of your goals is going to be like, to have your own pig. So we're going to come back in like 6 weeks and you're going to save your extra money and you're going to buy your own pig. And that's going to be one of your goals. Anyway, they'd set these series of these goals for these people. And they felt like pride in that. And then when they reached the end point, which was like the last goal for these people was to actually buy the land that their home is on. Now, put this in perspective. It costs about $50 to buy that land. And it would take them like a couple of years to save that money up. Like, so this is a serious chunk of change for them. But they feel proud. And then the deal is that once they achieve these goals, we go in and we build them a home. And so we were putting our money to this and we were going to help build these homes. And just the fact that we were there, we could see the people we were helping. We could see that they weren't necessarily just taking a handout. They're helping us build these houses.
Yes.
They'd achieved something. And so, as an educator, you know what it's all about. People have to feel pride in what they're accomplishing. And when you're teaching kids too, it's one of those things where you don't give kids answers all the time. You let them to figure it out for themselves.
Yes.
So you give them the tools to figure it out. But that kind of pro-social giving is, and I'm not saying everybody needs to fly off to Cambodia because you don't have to. You don't have to. You will find opportunities like that in your community if you go look for them. Everybody's community.
Yeah, we actually have something. Various cities in the country have something called Habitat for Humanity. And I'm not exactly sure how it works as far as obtaining the land, but I do know that the home buyer is part of the process. They actually are part of the home building process, which they have more ownership,
Yeah. So that's awesome because with Habitat, as far as I understand, I think you can donate or sometimes you can just be there to help. So you don't have to have money, but this pro-social giving can be giving of your time and or giving of your financial resources. So these sorts of things actually bolster not only our sense of contentment, but actually bolster our immune systems. And that's what's so incredible, that it affects us on a cellular level. Yeah. There was a fascinating study done where it was there was somebody experimenters were standing with a series of weights, and they asked people to hold like a 5-pound weight straight out, and they timed them to see how long they could hold this thing straight out with their arms straight out. They timed them, and then they recorded how long they held it out. And then at the end, they'd said to them too in the beginning, like, I'll give you $1 if you take part in this experiment. And then when it was finished, they said, okay, so you can have a choice here. If you want, you can keep the money or you can donate it to this children's charity. And so, some of them kept the money and some of them donated it to the children's charity. And just before they left, they said, oh, hang on a second, do me a favor. Let's try this one more time. I want to see how long you can hold this weight out. And what they found was that the people that actually donated the money to the charity were able to hold the weight out longer.
Wow.
Not only longer than the people who didn't donate, but longer than they did the first time. Wow. So there's just this feeling that they're doing the right thing. It actually affected them not just in terms of their moods, but affected their strengths too.
Yeah. And yeah, donating money to charity is pretty cool. I will be honest, I think it's even cooler when you donate your time, because you're actually able to see, like I took the kids and we went to a homeless shelter and we, helped them out. We gave out food and served them, and it felt good serving others and seeing the smile on their face. And it allowed my kids to see that, hey, you every night you go home, you have a bed to sleep in, you have hot air, you have heat or you have AC. These individuals don't. So it's just the simple things. They, when you talk about, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a lot of them aren't getting their regular basic needs met. When every day you're going to get your needs met. So it's just good to allow them to put things into perspective and understand that not every child in America has it as good as you do. So, it definitely is good to have those experiences, and you feel some sort of a sense of accomplishment when you are able to do that with your children. When we talk about balance, one thing, I have 3 kids and I have a daughter who can get $100 and she wants to immediately put $95 or $90 into an index fund, which is great. She knows that money will multiply by the time she's 50, 60, 70 years old. But then 2 or 3 days later, she comes to me and she wants money. She wants to take the money out of her account, or she wants to borrow money from me. And I said, baby, that's the other side of the coin. It's good to save, but you also need to understand how to spend and how to give, So why don't you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. It's that balance that comes down to that. So one of the things that some parents do, which is kind of interesting, is that they'll take something like an allowance and they'll split it into thirds. Like my sister did this with her kids. And so she said, okay, 1/3 of it is for investing, 1/3 of it is for charitable giving, and 1/3 of it is for your spending. And so, these kids are growing up with the idea of living for today, but having an eye on tomorrow and being generous. But, on the flip side, Rashad, what I like about what you're doing too is when you give your child a choice like that, you allow her to actually make mistakes. Like she realizes, wait a second, I've just taken this money and I've done, I've invested 95% of it and I have nothing for me. And it's a consequence of sorts, right? So she's figuring that out, which is a cool learning experience in itself.
Yep. Yeah. And then, her brother on the other, he's kind of on the other end of the spectrum where he would be the one that wants to give me $5 to invest and spend 95. So he's 15. He just got a job. So we are letting him keep 50% of his money and put the other 50% into a Roth IRA for a minor. So that's going well so far. We know that, by the time he's older, he's going to have a lot of money in that account. You really helped me with one thing. So, earlier in the summer, we got a dog, and, we had gotten to the point where we were investing and saving so much money, and we still are, but the dog really slowed down our investing plan. And I was like, hey, what's going on with this? And you said, hey, I can't remember word for word, but you said something like, eventually you'll have too much money anyway. So you might as well get things, you have to spend your money anyway. So I don't know if you remember that conversation, but if you think about it, you can invest so much money unless we can't predict how much money we're going to need. We can't predict how long we're going to live on this earth. If we were able to predict, if I knew I'd live 97 years, I can probably spend a certain amount of money down to zero, and take nothing with me. But, who wants to go to the grave with $15 million? So we have to be able to spend and enjoy our money in between. And there's nothing like walking into the house and having a 4-legged dog run into you and cuddling with you when you get in the house, because the kids don't do that anymore. So why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, we're looking at actual relationships.
Yep.
A dog is love. I mean, like, there's the old joke, right? Where you put your wife and you put the dog in the back of a car, and you just close the trunk, and then you open it up 5 minutes later and see which one's happy to see you. A dog is just like unconditional love.
It
It's
is.
so like, it's a family member, right?
Yes.
It's a new family member. And the idea of money, I think we have to have that balance. We don't absolutely kill ourselves trying to save, not literally kill ourselves, but trying to save for the future.
Yeah.
I think we can alleviate a lot of that pressure as well, knowing that, okay, of course, we do need to save for the future. But one of the things I talk about in the last chapter of balance is to actually rethink the concept of retirement. So instead of you putting all kinds of pressure on yourself to reach a certain financial number at a certain point, instead being maybe a little bit more relaxed about that, obviously saving, but knowing that or believing that you should continue to work at least part-time at something that you're passionate about into retirement age. Because the research suggests that, one, it gives us that sense of purpose. And
Mhm.
so remember, we talked about those 4 quadrants of success. And I said one of them was a sense of purpose. It gives you a reason to get up in the morning. You can only
Yes.
play golf every day and for so long.
Yes.
So it just gives you that thing to do. That could be volunteer and it could be for money. And so if it's for money, this alleviates a lot of the financial stress with respect to you needing to have a certain size nest egg. And so I think knowing that, too, the research behind it is very compelling. People who retire earlier on aggregate die earlier. And so it doesn't mean, and I'm not saying, somebody listening to this right now might be saying, well, wait a second, my Uncle Harry died when he was 40 and he's 100. Well, of course, I'm just talking about on aggregate. I'm not saying it happens to
Yeah.
everybody, but it strips us of our identities to a point when we
Yeah.
go cold turkey and we suddenly retire. It gives us that lack of, or at least that sense of purpose isn't strong, and we don't tend to then be interacting with younger people. So we're not thinking. Younger people make you think.
They
So
do.
especially in
Goodness.
a kind of a workforce,
Yes.
you've
Yes.
got us to an extent keep up. And so the research suggests that people that do continue working end up warding off things like Alzheimer's and dementia more effectively than people that, say, retire early. So I think, like, bringing it back to the example of like having a dog. I
Yeah.
mean, wow, like you're buying a relationship for your family, like you're purchasing something that a member of your family, I don't know if you grew up with a dog, but I still have dreams of dogs that I had when I was a kid. Like
Wow.
they're members of the family. Also, yeah, I think you made the good move there.
Yeah, and I didn't grow up with a dog, so it's kind of new to us, but it's amazing. It's totally different than having your own child. They're like kids, but I have a friend who just got a dog too, and I said, hey, is it true that what they say about dogs versus kids? Would you choose your dog over your kids? And she said it's still up for grabs. I was like, oh wow. But so before we wrap up, because you've given some great information, and I think anybody who is seeing this interview would rush out to get the book. But why don't we talk about the number? You said that there's a certain amount of money where if you go over that, it really won't make much of a difference. So, if you are a family of four and you're making $250,000 a year, you won't be any happier making $500,000 a year, correct?
Yeah, entirely correct. 100% correct. In fact, the interesting thing is that it's actually inversely proportional at a certain point. So happiness as it relates to income actually starts to turn downward. And again, when I'm referring to happiness, I'm referring to life satisfaction. And so this assessment has been done on a variety of different countries in Europe, North America, Central America, Africa, the Middle East, and in Asia. And it's so consistent that beyond a specific point, life satisfaction ends up dropping beyond a certain income point. So what people theorize here is that, generally speaking, it's very general. I mean, you could have someone who earns $1 million a year who's thrilled and living a really good, balanced life. But generally speaking, people in positions of high responsibility are those earning really high salaries. People who work really, really hard
Mhm.
are earning those really high salaries. They don't tend to be people working 20 hours a week. Now, they tend to be people that really, to a point, are really putting their jobs first and their careers first. So as a result of that, they're spending, generally speaking, of course, we're general here,
Yes.
less time outdoors, exercising, smelling the roses, spending time with their kids, enjoying experiences and activities with people they love, and a lot more time focused on and was stressed about work.
That's a good point. And I see it. I see people who continue to go back and get multiple degrees to try to get, various promotions, and then they get promotions and they might get a little extra money, but they're not necessarily any happier, and they might even be less happier than they were previously. And so I've even seen situations, not even necessarily in education, but outside of education, where someone will get this quote unquote dream job because of the money, but then they wish that they could go back to the previous job. And now they feel stuck in the new job because they spent all this money to obtain the certifications or degrees to get this new job, but they're miserable there. So, I'm at the point now, I've had this conversation with my wife where we've worked so hard to, dig ourselves out of debt and build wealth to where we no longer have to chase a raise or chase a promotion. If we want to get a promotion, that's fine, but we don't feel obligated, or we don't feel desperate to take a promotion because of money. Because like you said, it doesn't, a lot of time these new positions come with more stress and more hours. And, I'm at the stage in my life now where our kids, they need us there, that, kids are resilient. They'll be okay either way, but I'm telling myself that they need us there more than ever. And, I won't take any job to where it's going to pull me away from spending more time with my family. So I can definitely appreciate what you said there, man. Hey, I came into this interview, I didn't feel great, as you know, and I feel a lot better now just having had this conversation. We can go on for days. You're just a friendly guy and you have so much information to give. And, I really enjoy your time. Appreciate you giving a little guy like me an opportunity to sit down and talk to you on 2 separate occasions. So I really appreciate you, man. You have any questions for me?
Oh man, I was asking him, I'm so curious about some of the things that you're planning to do. Like, what does your summer look like?
Oh man, the summer we're gonna go on a cruise. We're gonna take the kids on an 8-day cruise from Galveston to the Bahamas, and they're definitely looking forward to that. And I might do another little husband and wife getaway with my wife. I don't know where that's gonna be, but like I told you, we spend so much time with experiences now, and it's totally been a game changer when we previously discussed the hedonic adaptation, hedonic treadmill, and that's totally changed the game in my life to where I know that if I buy a particular item, there's a good chance it's not going to accomplish what I thought it was going to accomplish. It's not going to make me happy unless it's something that's going to allow me to spend more time with my family or spend more time doing things that are with people that make me happy. So experiences, man, that's what we're going to be working on this summer.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's golden, because we know that when your kids are really old and they're recalling their lives, those are the things they're going to remember. With respect to things, time spent with you and your wife, they're going to remember that. They're not going to remember so much the stuff you gave them. They're going to remember the times that you had, the experiences that you enjoyed together. That's awesome.
Well, and it's funny. I remember a good buddy of mine, he was an assistant principal at one of the local schools, and my son was a student at that school in kindergarten. And he bought my son a toy, and 2 days later, that toy was broken. And I can't even tell you what the toy was. My son can't, and my buddy can't even tell you, So it's just that reminded me, like, wow, kids don't appreciate things. I mean, they might appreciate it for a couple of hours, and after that, to them, it's trash,
Yeah,
So,
and none of us do, right? I mean, we talked about hedonic adaptability last time, and you buy a new car and you're super thrilled about it, but sooner or later it just becomes another vehicle. It gets you from A to B, and you want an upgrade. So,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah, do any of us appreciate things? Really? Probably not at our core.
Yeah, that's a good point. And back in 2016, I had never been to Disney World in my life. I couldn't afford it growing up, and we said it was really in the middle of our whole financial plan, and we said, okay, we're gonna splurge on Disney World. And we splurged on Disney World right in the middle while we were still becoming debt free. And I can't necessarily tell you how much it costs. I think it was around $4,000. And of course, I could have put that $4,000 in an index fund. It might be worth $10,000 now, but that experience is priceless. Like, I can't put a price tag on it. The kids will remember that experience for the next 30, 40, 50 years. So, you know, it's all about, like you said, balance. You can't always, you know, have regrets, or you can't always look at things financially, because if you do that, there's nothing worth it, because, you know, a $50 I spend right now for a dinner might be worth $5,000 in 40 years. So I'm learning to not necessarily look at things from a financial lens all the time, because that'll just make you miserable, you know?
Yep. Touche. For
So,
sure.
hey, I really appreciate it, Mr. Hallam. I had such a good time sitting down and chatting with you, and I appreciate everybody who tuned in and everybody who's going to tune in later. Okay. And I'm going to actually cut the live video.